Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another review of The Acolyte. Today, we are taking a look at episode 5. We are officially more than halfway through this series, or at least the first season, depending on if we get a second series or second season. Yeah, yeah, I think for many people, this may be the turning point of the show where they maybe start to get a little bit more into it. I'll say right off the bat that I'm rescinding my complaint last episode about the bug situation. About that's really weird that they they did this whole thing with the bug and then they didn't do anything with it. They did. It was a setup for the next episode, which is fine. That's perfectly acceptable that they did that. I have no issue with that last time. But last week's episode was so poorly constructed, I want to say, that I was kind of going, I'm seeing lots of issues here, to where there were so many issues that like anything could have been an issue, and that was kind of one of them. But nope, I'm rescinding that because that was a setup for this week's episode, which is perfectly fine. So yeah, no, this episode was much improved, much better episode than last week. And I'm gonna deliberately dance around the big stuff because I want to really get to that. But before we get to the big stuff, I do want to say I still had some issues with it. I think I don't know who's editing this series, or if it's who's in charge of all that, but there's just some weird editing in this show. This episode in particular, like I feel like it kept ruining its own pacing. Again, pacing is such a hard thing for the show to figure out for some reason. Because even within the micro pacing of just this episode, with the flow of how the episode flowed, they kept cutting at points they shouldn't have been cutting at. There are 2 scenes in particular where I feel like they cut them and they shouldn't. No, 3. There's 3 scenes in particular where I feel they cut and they shouldn't have cut because it made no sense to cut there. So like, why did you cut there? One of the first 2 happened pretty much back to back. It's Master Soul and the Stranger, as he is known as now, when they first come face to face, and it's like I sense something familiar. Then they start to fight, and it cuts away. And then about 2 minutes later, we come back to them, and then they have another brief little exchange, and then it cuts away again. It's like, well, why did we bother cutting away there at all? Why didn't you have them do a brief little fight and then have their other little exchange and then I thought that was just weird. Then there's a similar situation in that same sequence where the thing that then they cut to I thought was weird, and then it felt like they cut it because I'm pretty sure it's Yord and Osha running through the forest, and they stop for a moment, and then it cuts away from them, and then it cuts back to Soul and the Stranger fighting, and then it cuts to Jeki and May fighting in Kalnaka's hut. So I feel like that was all cut very strangely, and it shouldn't have been cut that way. What they should have done is that they should have shown the full sequence of Soul and the Stranger beginning to fight. Then you cut to Yord and Osha running through the jungle and stopping. Then you cut to May and Jeki fighting in Kalnaka's hut, because then it's that moment where she gets cut on the leg and Jeki screams out in pain, and then Osha kind of senses that. That would have been a much cleaner, better edit, because it's clear that they have that Osha and Yord have not moved from where they were. So pairing those scenes together, keeping the Soul Stranger fight as one. I mean, it's not like these are long sequences either. They're not very. It would have been like 2 minutes. Then you cut to them running through the jungle and stopping to talk. Then we see what's happening to Jeki. She cries out in pain, and then we cut back to Yord and Osha, and then she's like, "Oh, hey, we need to go help." And then Yord insists that they move on. That would have just been a much cleaner cut and edit, where instead we get Soul Stranger running through the jungle with Yord and Osha, Soul Stranger, Jecki May fight, then back to Yord and Osha. I don't know. And the fact that they kept doing the Star Wars transition wipes and stuff in between those scenes, I'm like, okay, why are we editing this way? I promise I'm not deliberately looking for things to nitpick about. I only mention these things if they come to mind, and this just seems so obvious to me. I'm like, okay, this is weird editing. Why are you doing it like this? And maybe also the fact that the rest of the show has kind of had some weird editing, so it's more at the front of my mind because, like, I don't know, Andor doesn't have weird editing issues like this. Bad Batch doesn't have weird editing issues like this. Book of Boba Fett, for all its issues with pacing that it also has, at least the sequence of events that's happening episode per episode makes sense, and you don't feel like they're cutting too early or too late. It's like, well, why'd you put this scene here? It's like that all flows fine. It's just like, why didn't you focus on Boba Fett? But that's, go back to those reviews. So I don't know. There's just something weird about the editing of the Acolyte. So you kind of had those issues early in the episode. And then at the end of the episode, when May and Osha see each other, May stuns Soul. And then they do a wipe, and you see a pretty sunset. And then you cut back to May standing there on that little rock or whatever. It's at a different angle, and Osha cautiously approaches her. And this is the first time that they're really going to be able to have a conversation in like 16 years or whatever. I like, why did you put that random transition in there? You didn't need it because it's the same scene. You've not moved locations. It's not like they ran to some other portion of the jungle. It's like, that's why you do establishing transition shots like that, is if the characters have moved locations. But they haven't moved locations. They're in the same place. So it's like, okay, we're going to waste 25 seconds here with the sunset shot, and we're back. It's like, why? Why are you doing this? This is so weird. It's like, I'm going to be very eager to see, because as of right now, I still feel like doing the third episode as an entire flashback and not intercutting it with the events of last week's episode was a mistake. So I'm going to be very interested to see when the series wraps up. I'm sure there's going to be some people out there that will go through and re-edit this show, and I wonder if it will make it stronger, because the editing has just not been doing the show any favors. I think that is my biggest issue with the show, is the editing. Everything else has been, I think, fine. I don't even, some people are going, the main actress for May and Osha is really flat. I'm like, I think she's fine. I think she's giving the performance that's being required for the character. I'm not like too picky on actors and how they perform their characters, unless it's like atrociously bad. And I don't think what's her face that's doing May and Osha, I don't think she's been atrociously bad. Is she maybe playing the characters too similarly sometimes? Yeah, perhaps. But I don't think there's like a huge issue with her acting. So pretty much everything I've been kind of fine with. It's literally just been the editing and how that affects the pacing and how that affects the overall story that I think has been the big issue with this show. And unfortunately, there is still some issues with that in this episode. But compared to the last two episodes, I think the weird editing in this episode is definitely more of a nitpick with this episode. It's still weird, and I'm like, why did you do that? But it's not a huge detractor like the last two episodes, where it's like, this episode shouldn't exist as an episode. You should have interspliced all these flashbacks throughout the show in other places. But no, the rest of the episode I thought was good. Great even. The lightsaber combat between the stranger and all of the Jedi, I thought was really, really cool. I'm not the one of these people that, I don't particularly care for the sequels. I think they have a lot of flaws in them, but I don't hate the sequels. And I didn't mind the lightsaber combat in the sequels, but seeing And even then, the lightsaber combat in the sequels, I think, makes sense for the era it's in. But seeing the type of lightsaber fight choreography we are getting in this show, I'm like, oh, this is the good stuff right here. This is the good stuff. Especially all the little tricks that the stranger was pulling off, like impaling one Jedi, then using the Force to then impale the second Jedi and then decapitate them. Thank goodness for the censorship tree there. And it's like that's quite the move. I like the comment Yord made about he doesn't follow the rules of combat, and he said he's clearly trained, but he's not a Jedi. He doesn't follow the rules of combat. I really like that little line, because he's doing all these weird things. He's throwing his cloak. He's using the Force, and he's got all these different tricks up his sleeve and stuff. It's definitely a dark side. What I would describe as a Darksider's fighting style. Very cloak and dagger, sometimes literally, fighting style, and just very cool to see. And how he's just running circles around these all formally trained Jedi who really have no idea what to make of him and his fighting style. It gives me echoes of what Count Dooku said to Grievous in the Clone Wars micro series, where your first move should not be to attack, it should be to intimidate, because then that will throw the Jedi off balance, which will then make them easier prey. I'm paraphrasing a little bit there, but that's the gist of what Dooku said, and that kind of gives you an insight into how Grievous acts. And it's like, and if you can't do that, then it would be best for you to flee, because a Jedi fully at their wits, you're no match for. A la Obi-Wan Kenobi. So it definitely, the stranger definitely seems to be abiding by that, where it's like he comes in, throws everyone off balance, and then starts to just absolutely wreck shop. We don't even see the first casualty. We just see his body lying there that Osha wakes up to seeing. And the fact that there's already one Jedi dead and the episode hasn't even started yet is like, whoo, dear. and then the other red shirts just get annihilated very quickly. The Keldor Jedi, bye-bye. Yeah, you're definitely not Plo Koon. And then Cortosis being canonized here. I'm pretty sure this is its official canonization. No. Sorry. No, Cortosis is not being canonized here. It was actually canonized in the newer Thrawn novels. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the third one. No, it's the second one. I think it's Allegiances or Alliances or something like that, where it's interspliced between Thrawn and Vader doing a thing, and then years earlier, Thrawn and Anakin doing a thing together. And Cortosis is actually mentioned and is brought up in that book. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering that correctly. So, but in terms of on screen, this is definitely Cortosis' first canon on screen appearance, which is cool. It's definitely a surprise for them to include something like that, but it makes total sense. And the way it's implemented was just really cool. Like the stranger headbutting lightsaber blades to short them out. That's just really cool. I mean, that's really awesome. It's very bold, because that's another thing that's going to throw the Jedi off balance, is that you see anyone that they've gone up against, pirates or the Nile or from the New Republic age or whatever, they see this glowing blade of energy and see what it can do. They're going to want to not touch that, and they're going to want to stay as far away from that as possible. Yet here you have the stranger using the band on his arm and then his helmet to short out their sabers, to use that to his advantage. I mean, yeah, how the heck do you what do you do against that? That was a pretty cool cool move for him to use. I thought that was really awesome. So yeah, I don't really think I can sing enough praises for the combat in this episode. It was just very brutal and fast, and I mean it did give vibes of the prequel choreography, but it seemed like there's an extra lethality to it and everything. So yeah, just really really good lightsaber combat. Really enjoyed it. Now for, as I said, I wanted to wait. Now for the big stuff, which is the untimely demise of both Yord and Jeki, which surprised me. Yord dying wasn't necessarily the surprise. If any of like named characters in, because there's that shot at the end of the last episode where all the Jedi are standing there. If any of the named characters in that group had to have died, I would have put my money on Yord. But I didn't think that they would also kill off Jeki. That was the big surprise. I'm like, oh wow, you're killing a child. That's bold. And Soul actually says she was a child. To which the stranger then replies, "You brought her here." It's like, ooh. It's like, so yeah, the killing both of those characters off, especially in the manner they were killed off, because they didn't kill Jeki off screen or they didn't cut away from it or anything. They show, and how quick it is too. They show fully her being stabbed thrice, no less, in a manner that's like, it's so funny too, because the last couple of years there has been this discourse about why are people surviving all these lightsaber stabs. It's like, this doesn't make sense. It's like, but before, 2 or 3 years ago, most 99.9% of the time, everyone that was stabbed with a lightsaber always died. And then suddenly you've got characters in Kenobi surviving. Sabine survives being stabbed in Ahsoka. So it's just kind of like, oh, that's interesting that we've got people surviving. It's like, well, for anyone that complains about this, watch this episode, because you get stabbed with a lightsaber in this episode. There's no coming back from that. But also the strikes from where people are being stabbed are definitely more deliberate and lethal, I think, in the choreography. Because Jeki, I mean, you look at the three, people are joking online saying it's the 3-hole punch. You see that. I mean, that's like both lungs and like the heart/spinal column. If the Thelan species, I'm pretty sure it's a Thelan, if they have any sort of similar biology to humans, then that's like, that's like both lungs and probably the heart/spinal column, nervous system. So it's like, yeah, she's not walking away from that. There's no universe where you can twist that and go, oh, it was in the gut. There wasn't really major organs. Like, no, these were major organs. She is dead. And the impact at which she hit the ground like a sack of potatoes, I actually find this whole moment kind of haunting. And props to what's her name, Daphne Keane, I think she was in Logan. Props to her for really selling this in her performance, because that surprised look that then oh so subtly you can read on her face, where it shifts from surprise to blankness, I'm dead, as she then on her face, as it's like she's surprised and then she dies, but she's still standing. And when her lightsaber blade turns off, you can really read on her face that this is no longer surprise. This is just blank, and that's just where her face stopped when she died, and then she just topples over. The fact that this is a child, and we don't know her exact age. I'm thinking she's somewhere in her like early teens, if I had to guess. I mean, she is kind of early Clone Wars Ahsoka age here, I'm assuming. Having her die, especially like that, is, I said it a minute ago, I think it's kind of haunting, especially the way they portrayed that. Because like I said, they didn't cut away. They didn't just show her body with the implication, just making you, figure it out on your own and infer that's what happened. No, they show it. They show her face, and then they show her body several times. To let that sink in. This is a kid that just died. And it's like, it's really, really dark. It's like, for whatever issues I have with the show, the weird pacing, the editing mistakes, what I would say, like messing up the reverse shot in episode 3, like, how do you mess that up? That's like filmmaking 101 almost. It's like for mistakes and weirdness like that, I have to give them props and credit for doing that moment extremely well. Extremely well. I thought that was really, really great. And that's going to make top 10 lists of darkest Star Wars moments of all time, where all the Jedi die in the scene. I mean, and it's not like we haven't seen kids die in Star Wars before. I mean, look at Revenge of the Sith. Because I mean, they cut away from Anakin killing the younglings in the council chambers. So I mean, that's what I'm it's like that's a cutaway, but we know what happened. And then you do see the youngling die trying to, I'm assuming trying to steal Bail Organa's speeder to escape the temple. And then he's gunned down by the 501st. So we see that. But even then, that was a blaster shot. He was kind of was kind of in the background. He wasn't fully in the foreground and everything. And the more important thing about that scene is Bail's reaction, I think. So you don't really completely see it. They don't really focus on it as much. We're here, they focus on it. And even in Clone Wars, because there's I can't remember her name, but she was the older Padawan that had been stranded on the Trandoshan hunting planet at the end of season 3, and you see her get shot, and it's like, yeah, that's a shot straight through the heart, and she dies. But even that, I don't think is as visceral as what happened to Jecki, and that's props for pulling that off, because they could have done it and it could have come off as really, really cheesy. But I thought they handled that masterfully. And especially seeing who the stranger is, like, no surprise it was Quamir, or however you say his name. I've heard a couple different pronunciations. Not a surprise that it's him, but I think the thing that really sells that quote-unquote reveal, not reveal because a lot of us guessed who it was already. I think the thing that sells that is the performance by the guy playing him, because he is a completely different character from what we had seen earlier in the show. I mean, this is a completely different person. Now, I think you see shades of him in the other episodes, like when he's mixing the poison and for May to use against to give Master Torban. I think, like, when he starts mixing the drink and he's talking about, the riddles and stuff like that, that was like my first, like, oh, this is him. This is obviously him. It's like, so you see little shades like that. And then, of course, they laid it on pretty thick last episode. It's like, well, how do you know him? It's like, oh, he just collects people, and he's kind of wishy-washy about how he knows them and stuff. But he has such, like, this little slimy, wimpy appearance. Like, he seems smaller in stature when he's Quamir versus the stranger, and then he's always wearing a cloak, so you can't really always, or baggy clothes, so you can't always really tell, what his full size or anything. So then to see him really on display here, I mean, he is fit. He's got big muscles on his arms. I mean, and he is using that power not only physically, but of also the power of the Force. It's like and also the power of that dual identity, because that moment where May sees his face and he switches from the dark, menacing stranger back to Quamir and just goes, hello, to kind of distract her, and dips into the other persona, and then he flips his cloak at Soul to, kind of distract him, and then he uses the Force to immediately grab May by the neck. Whoo! Oh boy, yeah, this guy is not to be trifled with, and the fact that, he just killed like 7 of the 9 Jedi that were on this mission, or however many there were. And it's like, because at that point Yord was still alive, not for much longer, but Yord was still alive. So it's like, it was just Soul and Yord left, and he'd killed everyone else that were Jedi on that trip. So, and he had also killed Kelnaka as well. So, yeah. So I think bravo to the guy playing the stranger as well. I think he's doing a really good job Now, the question, of course, is he a Sith? Is he not a Sith? I think one of the writers said on Twitter that he is a Sith, but then that was immediately seems to have been contradicted by the official Star Wars channels that were saying that were kind of more coy on it, where they were saying it's like, Jedi would call him Sith, but this unknown Darksider, and it's like, okay, so the Star Wars pages, the actual official Star Wars pages, are being a little more coy on it, so they're not fully revealing exactly what he is yet. I'm not one to immediately jump out on a limb here, because I think the dialogue of what he said, well, Jedi, like, he would probably call me Sith. And the fact that they've established the witches and how, and that's why I think having some of the backstory be revealed was important, and just not do a full episode that destroys the pacing of your show. And that's why last episode, sprinkle some of them in, just give us just enough to get the gist. We didn't need the whole thing spelled out for us in a whole episode. So I think it is definitely possible that he is some other Darksider. A big clue maybe to that is the fact that they very clearly play Kylo Ren's motif at the end of the episode. That dun 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 dun. That is it. That's what that is at the very end when he puts the cloak over the unconscious Osha. That's Kylo Ren's theme. There's no way of getting around that. It's not, ooh, it kind of sounds like this, but it also sort of kind of doesn't. It sounds like a variation. No, that is Kylo Ren's theme. So I think now the thing is, are they introducing the first, the founding member of the Knights of Ren? I don't know. That could be interesting. Or are they using that more as he's a Darksider, but he's not a Sith. He's kind of outside the circle type thing. So I don't know. I was, because again, the language that he used and everything, I'm totally fine. I'm like, oh yeah, he's just a Force user that harnesses the power of the dark side, and he just wants to be left alone and kind of do his own thing. Maybe he's Sith, maybe he's not. But the inclusion of Kylo Ren's theme at the end there, I thought was very, that has to be deliberate. There's no way that the composer for this show just accidentally recreates Kylo Ren's theme, trying to make something that sounds bad guy-ish. So I don't know. So we'll have to wait and see what they do with that. So final thing here is the Parent Trap twin switcheroo situation we got going on here. I think this is something that's not going to last very long and is going to get uncovered very quickly. First of all, there is no way that the stranger does not know that the person that is unconscious on the jungle floor is Osha, not May. First of all, the hair's shorter. It's obviously short. The clothing's different. He doesn't just immediately go to murder her, which he seemed pretty intent on doing to May. And he's had this weird fascination with Osha since the very beginning, the first moment he sees her. She walks in to the apothecary shop in episode 2, and you can kind of tell he already knows. But at least that's the way I read it. And, he's talking and stuff, and then he kind of gets closer, and he's like, wow, you look exactly like May. So it's I kind of felt like he always knew that was someone else. He probably sensed it. And then this episode, there's that moment where he's like, oh, is this your master? And it's, there seems to be, he has some sort of odd fixation on Osha. And I think he's going to definitely try to turn Osha to becoming his acolyte, and him take May's place. And then as for May, with Master Soul, that has to get figured out pretty quickly. I can understand Soul not seeing through it immediately, But I feel like once they get back to the ship and you've got Basil following them, and I think he already knows something up because he's looking at the little droid part that he has and sniffing that and then following behind them. I think he clearly already knows that something's up. So I feel like by halfway through the next episode, Soul is going to probably know that, oh, here we go. You're May. And then maybe he's going to turn her towards the light. And so it's like, well, but then there's the question of, I have two questions about these flashbacks. One being, the stranger does say, you don't remember me. So the stranger has run into Soul prior to a couple episodes ago. Then, two, what really happened on Brindok 16 years ago? So and how involved is the stranger in the events that transpired there? Like is he a witness to what happened? And the Jedi were like, well, we need to make sure there are no witnesses here. And so they kill everyone, which would be a very dark sider thing for them to do. But I don't know. Is what happened on Brindok something that Soul just kind of stumbled into, like the other Jedi were the ones doing things that weren't great, and he kind of stumbled into it and didn't realize what was happening or what really happened until later. So like he is kind of innocent in everything that happened, while the other three Jedi aren't, which is maybe why Kelnaka's hidden out in shame, and Torben took the Varash vow, I think it is, from the Vader comics, which I didn't mention that a couple weeks ago, but I thought that was cool because I've read those comics, and so it was cool to see that implemented in TV. So yeah, I have questions I about how all that works out. And then yeah, I think the twin switcheroo thing, I think that's going to get dealt with pretty quickly. It's especially for Force users, it's got to be so obvious after time, especially for Soul. He's got to realize, oh wait, you're May, pretty quickly. And I think that it's going to last as long as if it lasts more than an episode, then I think, okay, this is just beyond believable at this point. Now, some people would say the same about the stranger sneaking up on all the Jedi. It's like, no one sensed this guy until he revealed himself. It's like, I mean, Darth Sidious, anyone? So it's like, so that I don't necessarily have a problem with. But yeah, I mean, this is someone that it's the twin sister of your former apprentice and stuff. That I think should be a little more obvious. But I don't know. Maybe it's going to be a thing where Soul is so shaken that his connection to the Force becomes diluted or something. Now, I do think they're going to very clearly use the tattoo on Osha's arm to be the moment, because that's kind of a trope where he's gonna look at her and he's gonna say, Osha, let me see your arm. And it's like, why? It's like, let me see the tattoo on your arm. And then May's going to realize the jig is up and she's going to try to run away and they're going to capture her. Hopefully that's kind of a red herring setup, but I feel like that's an obvious setup that they've got going so far. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a lot better than the last one. It even improved some things in retrospect from the last one. Like, that weird editing just keeps getting at me. I'm like, why are you editing it this way? This is not the most effective way to do this. But also, maybe I'm an editor. So maybe that's just me being nitpicky. I don't know. Let me know if you thought the editing in those moments was weird too, because it's like, because if they kept cutting back to that and stuff, and like they were constantly on the move, then I wouldn't think anything about it. But they just kept cutting back to the same locations. Again, I think that's like I said, I think that's one of those budget things. They only have so many sets, so they got to utilize them. So it's like, well, maybe in the original script, they were supposed to be running, and it was supposed to be a different part of the jungle, but then they got to actual production. They're like, nah, we'll just film the same thing. It's not really like it's going to matter, and it just looks a little sloppy to me anyway. So, but yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought the lightsaber stuff and the fights and how that all panned out was very well done, and I'm eager to see where all of this goes. So hopefully we're on the upswing here and things just continue to improve. And they kind of had have got some kinks worked out, and they've got a better presentation for us going forward. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Definitely the best episode so far of the show. And I am eagerly awaiting next week. So anyway, that'll be it for this review. So thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are in the description below. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.